Welcome to the Arithmetic Zone and welcome to our new computer science series. This time, I'm going to be teaching some simple Java, not JavaScript, which I already taught in my basic JavaScript series. So, as the name implies, the purpose of this series is to just give you a basic understanding of the Java coding language. We're not going to be doing anything crazy, but the knowledge that you hopefully get from these tutorials in this series will hopefully allow you to gain additional knowledge much quicker. So, without further ado, let's begin. And obviously, we're going to have to make a file in Visual Studio Code. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open my folder and go into my CS folder. And we're going to make a new folder. We're going to call it Java. So we're going to select that folder, and this is going to be our workspace for this whole series. So we're going to make a file, and let's just call this file starter.java. So we were doing .js for all of our JavaScript files, now we're going to do .java. And that's how the computer knows by looking at that file extension this is going to be made using Java. So there's a lot of complex things about Java. You can't just immediately put a single statement here and then expect that to work. One rule with Java is that when you make a file, you better make sure that the class that you're making has that same name. So Java is a class-oriented coding language where basically each file is its own class, and I'm going to go more in depth with classes later on. But just for now, let's just write class and then whatever you named your file. So I called it starter, and then write in brackets. So inside of here is where we're going to be working, and just for today we're going to have a main method. So we're going to call it public static void main string hard brackets like that, and then args like that, and then brackets. And right here is where we're going to be writing our code. So obviously, this is very confusing right now. Don't worry about what this means right now, but just know that this is the main method, and you can add additional procedures slash functions that you can make later. We're not going to do that today, though. And remember to have everything in class file name. You can also say public class or private class, but we're not going to worry about that right now. So, let's begin with a simple printing statement. In JavaScript, we used console.log. Here we use a more complicated expression, System.out.print, and then parentheses. And we want to print out a string, and just like JavaScript, we use quotes for strings. So let's do the typical hello world. And another thing about Java, for every line, for every statement you write in Java, make sure it ends with a semicolon. Now, you don't do this if you're beginning a section of code. Like right here, I'm beginning a section of code with these brackets. So this does not, and also here I'm ending it. So these do not require the semicolons, but this statement does. In JavaScript, the semicolons, you were able to add them, but they were optional. And you can see right here, it says S:. This refers to our little parameter, because the print is a method that somebody made with a string parameter s, and hello world is going to be our parameter. So if you want to see this in action, let's press F5, and we see that it successfully prints out hello world. And there's another variation of System.out.print, but before I show it to you, let's see what happens if I have two of these statements. You would expect them to both print out hello world on separate lines, but no, it prints out hello world, all on one line with no space. So that's because when you use System.out.print, it just prints whatever string you passed into the terminal, and then it doesn't create a new line every time you call this. So when you just say System.out.print twice, it's going to print them out both on the same line. So to fix this, you want to use the other print method, which is called System.out.println, or print line. So parameter changed to X, but this basically functions the exact same as the print method, but now when it prints out hello world, after printing out hello world, it's gonna print out, it's gonna tell the terminal to go on to the next line, so that once it reaches the second System.out.print, it's already on the new line. So yeah, this basically prints out hello world and then a blank line, and then this prints out hello world on that same line you were already on, which is the new line. And one special thing to note, Java is a language that when you run the code, it first checks to see if it compiles. And compiles means, it's checking to see if there's anything wrong with it. And once it determines that there's nothing wrong with it, then it actually runs and executes the code. So what that means is, let's say I have a mistake right here. Let's say I say System.out.print without the T. If I try to run this, it's going to throw me an error. It's going to throw me an error before it even prints out this statement, even though everything is correct up until this line. So just keep in mind that when you're dealing with Java, make sure everything works as intended. Make sure everything works as intended before you run your code, or else you're basically not going to see anything. This will actually go into my next point, which is that Java is a pretty strict language. It makes sure that everything is very exact and very well defined. And Java is what you call a static language, while JavaScript is a dynamic language. And what that means is Java mandates you that every time you make a new variable, you declare what type that variable is, so Java knows exactly what type it's dealing with. With JavaScript, when you declare a variable, you can just say, let variable name or var variable name, and then JavaScript can just figure out on its own what value it's being passed to determine what type that variable is. But sometimes, leaving that up to the coding language to decide leaves room for errors that you might not notice. So what do I mean by all of that? Well, let's first turn these into comments. So I can just highlight all this and press Control/. And yes, for single line comments, you use double slash marks. If you want to do multi-line comments, what you do is you use asterisk in the beginning, and then asterisk slash at the end. And I'm not sure why this whole thing just got deleted, but alright. So let's work with variables. As I said, in Java, you have to declare the type of variable. So what that means is I can't do let str equals hello world. Even if I add the semicolon, it's going to fix what's wrong on the right side but not on the left side, because I can't say let variable name equal a value like I can with JavaScript. So what are we going to have to do? We have to declare what type it is. This is of type string, which string is essentially any value that's in quotes, or you can write in any text, with few exceptions, but usually you use strings for words, symbols, and combinations of numbers. So how does Java know that this is a string? Well, we say string str, make sure it's capitalized. Now let's go over other data types. JavaScript has numbers, but in Java actually splits numbers into two categories, integers and doubles. Integers are denoted with lowercase int, like that. So we're going to say int num1 is equal to 5. And as the name implies, an int must be a number with like no decimal point. So whole numbers, 5, 6, 3, 7, 10. If you want a decimal, then you use the other data type called double. I'm going to say double num2 is equal to 4.5, and double is more flexible. You can add in a decimal point and then have however many values you want after it, but I believe there is a finite limit in there somewhere. And Java also does have the Boolean data type, so Boolean bool is equal to true. And remember to always have your semicolons in Java, remember. So Booleans can only be true or false. So yeah, Booleans can essentially only be two values. Ints have some range that I don't remember exactly, but if you want to get the max value, you would say integer dot max value and then min value for the minimum value. And then doubles have a much wider range, obviously, because you can account for the decimal point. So why does Java feel the need to just make everything harder for us by making us declare all these variables? Well, aside from making it a little more easier for you to catch mistakes in your code if something goes wrong, this also allows Java to compile and execute code while using the least memory as possible, because Java doesn't have to waste time and waste memory allocating so much space for a variable when it knows that it's going to be a boolean. If it's a boolean, then it can only be one of two values, true or false. It doesn't have to allocate several bytes of memory for this bool variable like it would have to if it was a double variable, which could really be anything, or an str. And if I were to order these data types from takes up the least space to the most space, it would be boolean int double string. Notice how string is the only one that's capitalized, and that's because int, double, and boolean, these are all primitive data types that are like default data types that Java has, while string is a class or reference data type. And we're going to talk about that more later on, but essentially the main difference between a primitive and a reference data type, well, two main differences. One, only the reference data types have methods associated with them. So string has methods like length, substring, while int, double, and boolean really don't have anything. I did show you integer.max value and integer.min value, which I'll likely go over more later on, but those are not methods, actually. Those are just values. And the other major difference is that int, double, and boolean, whenever you pass these values into a procedure, it passes a copy of that value. While reference data types, if you pass in a reference data type as a parameter in a procedure, then you're actually passing the reference to that variable. So instead of sending a copy, if you send a reference to a procedure, it would, if any changes made to that reference, will affect the original value, which wouldn't happen for primitive data types. But again, this is all confusing talk, and this is all stuff I'm going to go on in the future. For now, I just want to focus on basic variables and how we can use them. So, as you may have already figured out, I can just write an str right here to print out hello world, or I'm just going to say hello, so the difference is easier to spot. And we print out hello, because we're printing out str, which is a string that's equal to hello. And I can also pass in the numbers, so num1 prints out 5. If I did num2, passes in 4.5, and I print out bool, it's going to print out true. And if I want to get user input from this console, what I can do is use something called a scanner. So what I'm going to do is, first, if you want to use a scanner, you have to import it. You have to import it like Python. So to do that, in the very beginning of your code, has to be in the beginning, import.java util.scanner. So we're importing the scanner class. Scanner is a reference data class, just like string. You don't have to import string because string is actually a default class because it's so commonly used. So to set up scanner, we have to write in this code. And don't worry about what this means. You don't really have to worry about that right now. And you can actually change the word scan into anything. Just know that whatever you change it to, you refer to that value instead of the word scan. So if I want to take in a variable using user input, let's say we're going to say string user input's our variable name. equals scan.nextLine. So when we use scan.nextLine, that's telling Java to look out for the next instance that the user inputs a string into this terminal right here. So, and of course, let's print out user input. So when the code gets to here, it like freezes for a bit, waits for the user to write something in here, and after they press return, prints that out. So let's see it in action. You're going to see nothing be printed out initially, but if I write in hey, Java tells me back hey because it prints out hey, like that. There's other variations of this next line. Next line is for strings. If you want the next integer, then change this to int and change that to next int. Run the code. If I write in the number 8, Java tells me back 8. For doubles, next double. So change that to a double as well. If I run the code, write in a number, say 1.2, Java tells me back 1.2. So that's basic user input using the scanner class. So make sure you have this statement. Of course, scan doesn't have to be the word scan, but make sure if it's not, then when you call this method, you're doing it on whatever you call it. And remember to always import scanner, or else none of this is going to work. You can also import all the classes of java.util by doing java.util.asterisk and then semicolon. And that basically accomplishes the same thing. So if I write in 0.5, 0.5, when you use the asterisk instead of referring to the specific class, you're importing all the classes of java.util. So I'd argue that just doing the asterisk is better than just writing the specific class, because if you have to use other classes of java.util, which we are going to be doing later on, then you're going to have multiple import statements. But anyway, that's going to be it for today's video. I know you guys may have felt like you didn't learn too much, but this is how it is. Every time you learn a new coding language, you have to learn how it works. So you got to make a class, make sure it's named the same as what your file was before the file extension. Make sure you have a main method formatted this way. And then you have to learn about all the different intricacies of this new coding language. You have to declare the type of your variable when making new variables. Numbers is split up to integers and doubles, which is basically decimals. And then you have to learn out the new ways of how to print out stuff on separate lines, how to get basic user input. It's all much more complicated than JavaScript, which is definitely more user-friendly. But we're going to see the merits of Java later on in this series. So I hope you guys have a nice day and stay tuned.